Let's welcome in Alex Hurst, host of the True Faith Newcastle United podcast. Alex, really appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much, mate. We've been waiting to see what Newcastle were going to do in this transfer window. There's a lot of talk about Barella and whether or not Inter Milan were going to accept that. It looks like Barella's going to stay, but some say the next best thing is Tonali. He looks like he's coming for a fee of around 70 million euros. You must be happy with that one.
Yeah, delighted. Newcastle's most important position to fill was central midfield. Rudiger did a lot of the work by himself last season. So to get another box-to-box player who's just kind of full of legs, which is what Eddie Howe wants from all his players, really, but particularly his midfield players, it's really positive.
How far off do you think you are in terms of squad and those superstar players to really make a proper push for it? I mean, I think Newcastle have done fantastically well to get to a League Cup final and make that top four. It's Champions League football next season, but the next step will be to really go for it and really challenge. How far away do you think you are player-wise?
Yeah, not far, I think this season Newcastle finished fourth, but they left a lot of points out there. They dominated a lot of games that they didn't have the quality to finish, particularly teams lower in the league off. Your Leeds, Bournemouth, West Ham's, who came to St James's Park, made it really difficult and played really well, take nothing away from them. But they're really missing a James Maddison or a player of that ilk to kind of unlock defences.
Isn't that St Maximum? Isn't that him?
Yeah, he's got to stay fit, mate. He's just been so unfit this season. I love the bloke, but he splits opinions. He's worth the admission fee of the ticket alone. But he's just the intensity Eddie Howe's side's play at and the running they've got to do off the ball, it just doesn't seem for him, as much as I hate to say it.
You mentioned James Maddison there. It's rumoured that he prefers the idea of going to Tottenham over Newcastle, which I find bewildering, but that does seem to be the case. Do you want to try and woo him? Are you desperate to get hold of him, or do you trust Eddie Howe that he'll be able to find someone else if this one doesn't go your way?
I think the fact that Howe's been such a long-time admirer, we were linked with him heavily, really heavily this time last year, and he was one of the favourites to come last season. I think they actually did put a bid into Leicester last summer, and it got knocked back. So I think Howe really, really wants Maddison. In terms of who else is out there who can unlock Premier League defences, it's a really hard talent to find, and that's why these players cost so much money at the top end of the pitch. So I think they've put a lot on Maddison. I agree with you, Rory. Obviously, I think Spurs, 8th place team, maybe they'll get 7th next season. I don't know. They might have a good season, but we're in a different league to them now, so it'd be a strange one for me.
Let's go back to Sandro Tonali. Obviously, look, Italian international. AC Milan, we saw get to the Champions League semi-finals last year. He was an important player for them. What are you expecting? Obviously, it looks exciting, him linking up with Bruno in that midfield area. Are you expecting a defensive-minded player? You heard the comparisons there to Pirlo. What are you expecting him to offer the club?
I think I'll not lie to you, lads. I'm not a long-time Tonali admirer. Don't watch loads of Italian football like most Newcastle fans. But what we've read up about in the last 24, 48 hours is this is a player who can do a bit of everything. He covers more ground than anyone else for Milan, which is the kind of player Eddie Howe wants. We need someone to play that kind of defensive midfield /6 position, which allows Bruno Guimaraes to do what he did before he came to Newcastle, and that's play further up the pitch, close to the opposition box, and that's where you want him to play. He's had to do a lot of defensive work for Newcastle in the season just gone, and don't get me wrong, he was brilliant, but we want to see him in an attacking perspective. So really hoping that Tonali allows Bruno to play further forward, allows Joe Linton to play further forward and do the kind of things he's been doing really well at the top end of the pitch. So a kind of ball playing number 6, but also someone who can get up and down the pitch. And Eddie Howe likes versatile players. He doesn't like players who are stuck to one position. And again, that's maybe a fall down with St Maximin. Tonali can run with the ball, can run past players as well. So I think he'll bring a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I think you've got one of the most, just moving on here, I think you've got one of the most exciting forwards in Europe, and Alexander Isak. I think, and people always laugh at it when I make the comparison to him and Henry. Honestly, he reminds me of Henry when Henry first came to Arsenal. Struggles to stay fit, and not just that, but Eddie Howe doesn't seem to want to play both him and Callum Wilson up front together. Very rarely does he start the two. Do you think he might shift away from that idea and maybe give them both a run together in the squad?
Yeah, well, when they have played together this season, the results actually haven't been great. And I think a player like Isak, he's just got to be in the box. Like, you just want him in the penalty box. He played a little bit wide left after he scored that ridiculous goal or got the assist against Everton at their place, and I think they tried to play him wide left, and then You just want Alexander Isak in the penalty box and good things will happen for your team. And you're right, it is such a strange one because Wilson's in the form of his career. He's getting starts for, not starts, but he's playing for England and he's scoring goals for England, and he actually doesn't get into the side. So I think Howe really is going to stick with this 4-3-3. That's his template. He went away to Atletico Madrid and kind of learnt this new formation and style of play. That's what he wants to do. And unfortunately, there is only space really for one striker in that. And if you've got to pick, which he does, it's going to be Isak every time.
What's the dream for next season, Alex? Obviously, you've got European football now, your Premier League top 4 status. You want to solidify that. The wait for a trophy has been far too long for a club of your stature. Have you got a dream, an overarching strategy for next season? What are you hoping for?
This might shock you, Roy, but I think Newcastle want to push for the Premier League title. Everything coming out of that club, from the manager to the owners to the technical director, is not about taking steps back or looking behind them. No one thought they'd finish top 4 this season. They finished top 4 comfortably in the end. I think that inside the club themselves, they are not thinking about consolidation. They are thinking about how do we catch Arsenal and then how do we catch Manchester City. And, you know, they went 16 Premier League games unbeaten last season. They only lost 4 times in total. They played really well in some of the games that they did lose. You know, I think it's all about getting closer to the top 2 than looking behind us.
Yeah. Quick word on young Anthony Gordon. Obviously, look, currently with England 21. Not quite sure if he's going to start the games there, but he came in at a strange time when I don't necessarily think you needed him. And I almost feel like he fills the void that you're asking Maddison to do as well. Does that mean that you're not that sure about him? Are there still question marks under Gordon?
Yeah, he definitely hasn't had the impact I think a lot of fans would have hoped for, he himself. But to be fair to Gordon, he's a pretty honest lad, and he's said on the record since the season finished that he came in from Everton, and the step up just in training was massive for him. He didn't expect, he kind of thought he would be, if not a big fish in a small pond like he was at Everton, but one of the star players. And he's just said, I'm just not as good currently as a lot of these lads in this squad, and I've got a lot to do. Really refreshing from him. But having said that, if you spend £45 million in a player, you'd expect a little bit more output. But Newcastle played really, really well the second half of last season. They went on another massive winning streak. It wasn't like he was doing anything wrong not to get into the side. He just couldn't dislodge. Joe Linton played his position for a large part of that second half of the season, and Joe Linton, put in the form of his life. So it's not just down to Gordon. And I think, like Rory said before, with Champions League football and there being 4 competitions, he'll get more of a chance next season to show what he's about.
Indeed he will. Alex Hurst, really appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you very, very much. Host of the True Faith Newcastle United podcast. You mentioned Joe Linton there in the Brazilian squad now as well, so that shows just how good Joe Linton's season's been.